Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second session of the series Conversation About Change. Last week we talked about global access and travel, and this week we will be talking about modern education, but more specifically how that connects with the parent-teacher alignment. My name is Paige. I'm the founder of Expat Education, and I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. Okay, so welcome. Thank you again so much for being here. You can comment in the chat where you're from and what age you teach or how old your children are. I will be uploading this to YouTube to access later in case, for those people who registered and couldn't show. But I just wanted to welcome you, and with the other sessions, I've also included this quote just so that we can really start to process what the confidence from doing something again and again will do for our decision making. So the more confident we feel about a subject, the better we feel about making decisions for ourselves and the world around us. I'll share more about resources with Expat Education, but I just really want to share through each session just how important communication skills are, especially in a digital age, and we'll dive into that with what that means for a parent and for a teacher. So here's just a quick outline of the series. And today we'll be focusing on the teaching, like I said, also just talking about those resources for what you can do with this. Because I think a lot of the time, conceptually, we can understand communication skills, but then actually practically doing it each day in a way that is fulfilling and impactful and intentional, that's where Expat Ed can help you out. Okay, so there's a quick intro of a 6-month trip I recently took, and I always like to share a video to introduce myself just to show how much I value experiences and how much those experiences impact us. And so obviously through experiences, we go to different places and meet different people and have different thoughts, and those start to add up. And so I like to use experiential learning. I know it's digital, but also we don't have all the access in the world anyway at the same given time. So for children, they have routine, and so giving them some structure with videos, but also experiential learning to just start to promote those global thoughts is helpful. And that will lead into discussion that we'll talk about. But as somebody who lives out of a backpack and loves to take jobs abroad, to explore new places, and just create this platform in order to support parents and teachers. Last week with the global travel, we talked about perspective, and this will be really helpful as we dive into having conversations with children. So, conversations about change. We live in a world that's changing faster than ever, globally, culturally, and technologically. But change doesn't just happen to us. It's something we can help kids understand, adapt to, and lead through. That starts with conversation. When we talk openly about change in travel, education, and technology, we build awareness, empathy, and resilience. These conversations don't need to be perfect, but they do need to happen. Because raising thoughtful, curious children in a changing world requires us to think differently too. So today we'll be talking about modern education, and I just encourage you throughout this session to be relating to things that I say, whether you can relate that you agree with it, or you disagree with it, or you've had a similar experience, or you have not. This is really helpful in order to make that bridge as you start to become proactive in conversation with your kids, just to bring up areas of micro lessons, which we'll get to. When I started global conversations with my students, I noticed a change really quickly, actually. Through their online learning, I gave them a voice prompt to share their thoughts. And they were so positive about their experience, as well as really putting together like a synthesized reaction. And I'll just give you one example of that. So I had a 10-year-old say in a voice message that before he didn't actually find the world that interesting. And now he can see that the world includes a lot of people, there's a lot of things in the world, and it's actually interesting to him now. So that's synthesizing, because you take what you did think and what you did know, and then you combine it with, this new perception or this changed perception. And so he's really making a comparison pretty quickly. And then I would get feedback from the parents as well, and they had such positive things to say. And so I'm saying this so that you can understand that conversations have a huge impact. And these children were happy without the global access. We had fun doing different projects in school and catching up with each other. But these conversations really bring out a part of a student to bring up new topics. And that gives them a shared experience with other students, which they might not otherwise have. And then for parents, this is the same thing, where if you keep asking, how was your day? That's very normal, and I would not expect that to change, but also just giving a new prompt to how your child can respond and express themselves. So modern education, we can imagine, is changing in a way that we need to be thinking about the world around us, but then also really question our traditional ways of learning. And we'll get to that. All right, so teach, even if you're a parent. Let's be honest, school today isn't built for the world our kids are growing into, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. Our goal is to find a parent-teacher alignment that helps children thrive in ways that systems alone can't. So, I say this just because we are going through a very big change of what technology is doing to not only our academics, but our social abilities. When I was a child, there were computers. However, there's just been such a huge advancement with how integrated it is. And so when we think about doing our spelling on an app, our standardized test on an app, our reading on an app, our math on an app, there's going to just be a lot of advocacy that we need to do for children to interact with each other, but also just really appreciate learning. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But we can't just wait for the government to tell us a new regulation to follow in order to be proactive. And we can't just wait for a school to tell us exactly how to succeed when we have tools to help us be proactive. So I'm hoping to just be in a partnership with, collaborating with teachers, parents, and schools to really just promote what this global access really means and how we can support children to adapt to this changing world. So that's why I say, let's reframe. Learning is happening everywhere, not just in classrooms. I think we start to go on autopilot when we associate learning with screen time. So if we go to school just to learn and then the rest is play, we're kind of missing the point that even play is learning. There's a lot that we can absorb just from interactions around us. I was talking to somebody the other day about working with children in Galapagos, and we would talk to the tourists at the pier. And although the goal is to practice vocabulary and to build confidence to practice English, they learned a lot about human behavior, of how people responded to them or how they were talked to. And so there's just so much more in our daily interactions that we learn. So with Expat Education, these conversations are going to be that momentum of how to learn. Okay, so it's going to set you up for critical thinking of what could they do? What would you do? How would they do it? That's okay to perform and to think differently, but also to accept that we come from different places and we have different ways of living and performing. And so it's not about saying the same thing as the parent or the teacher, but believing that the conversation is worth your time. So having just this access with Expat Education to have global awareness through people around the world and just get encouragement from people around the world from diverse experiences is going to support you to follow through with what learning looks like whether you're driving to school or you get home from school or you're bored on a Saturday or you want to talk about it over dinner or you watch it before you go for a walk. There's a lot of steps that we can take to just get ready to expand conversation. Modern education means being open to the world around you, embracing creativity and learning opportunities, and building communication skills inside and outside the classroom. So this parent-teacher alignment is important because we all have impact on how a child succeeds, and all of these experiences add up. Modern education also involves a lot of technology, and so being on the same page of the goals of still communicating and relating to those around us is really important. AI is going to speed up the journey, right? But the goal with Expat Education is to really pay attention to the journey, not just speed it up and be done, but actually process the journey, talk about the journey, observe the journey, learn from the journey. And we'll get more to that when we get to the resources. Teach. Even if you're a parent, we're all teachers, right? Traditional education is built to measure, not necessarily to grow. Overemphasis on testing, content memorization, standardization, it's going to have an impact whether we think about it or not. So we really have to process this one-directional learning. It is tailored to a child's level. So I'm not completely against technology. I'm not saying all of these things are bad. But when we think about if we do spelling online and it's just like the impact, and I could show you videos. There's so many different games and videos and ways that the child is interacting, but they're not talking, especially not interacting with others with these iPads. So we really need to process what that does over time. Are they comfortable talking to other people? Can they make mistakes in front of other people? Because I would say to a certain extent, an iPad creates a lot of safety, that it's like you can fail, you can fail and make mistakes and no one really knows except, the app. But really we want to encourage that engagement with kids. And what you'll realize if you visited a classroom or if you are a teacher, you might see this as the change happens too, is that there might be a lack of connection where children don't feel as comfortable talking to each other, or they don't know what to talk about. And then that progresses as they get older, right? Or you might find your classroom is really quiet. And I would notice that too when I was teaching, which is why I really was proactive every morning with my morning meetings to share a global conversation video, because it really gets the brain fired up to think globally, to reflect by, on your own account, and then relate to people around you. So because of this technology in modern education, this lacks the space for self-awareness and emotional regulation. If you're not talking about things and then you're just kind of having emotions to yourself, you're not really learning to regulate. And I will say with children and being overstimulated with screen time, just as adults can say they get overstimulated, they really need the support of what to do with that overstimulation. And then again, it lacks space for global or real world issues. Sometimes computers and apps just show so many games and not real life. It's just entertainment for a lot of it. So I really want, again, for the Expat Education platform to support you with what the world really looks like. It'll be traveling with me and really just seeing the inside look of living out of a backpack and interacting with people all over the world. And then the individualized feedback and growth mindset. So if we're not having a conversation with different people or just in general with a class, if we're not comfortable getting feedback of what do you think, what should I do, what would you recommend, and then kind of thinking about what this person said versus what this person said versus what this person said, and really just kind of analyzing that we have different opinions and we have different thoughts of action, then we're really missing out that education is just becoming like a test score, which I really, with this platform, really emphasize it is not that way. So we're preparing kids for a world that no longer exists unless we evolve the conversation. Okay, so technology will advance, and who knows what the legal system will do with the regulations of school. Who knows who will have access and who won't. Who knows if a parent will let their child work with AI at a younger age or not. Everybody's going to range on this, but if we don't have that common ground of just being able to talk about it, then kids are just going to grow up and either be super exposed, maybe too much exposed that it starts to wear on them, or not exposed at all, and then they're super thrown off by what's happening in the world, that they don't feel like they have the skills for it. So what I'm saying is just at a young age, not diving into social media, not giving them AI to do it on their own, but actually just talking about things like that. So with the platform, you will be given experiences and situations and stories to just kind of bring that up. So whether you're a parent or a teacher, you're part of a child's learning environment. And that's how we can reframe education. Teach, even if you're a parent. It doesn't have to just be in the classroom, right? We're reframing this mindset that it's anywhere. And also just, it doesn't just happen at home, but in those interactions in between as well. If you're at the restaurant, or if you're at the post office, or if you're walking down the street, there's these social engagement moments that if your child is learning like who, what, where, when, why, how, for example, to ask questions, then when you're at the post office or if you're at the restaurant, these videos will start to encourage that like real world interaction. So then you can model how you're asking questions, reflect and observe and share that experience with your child. And then, just kind of bring that up to encourage them when they feel comfortable or just along the way to ask these questions. Okay? Because content alone won't prepare them. If I just tell them in class to ask who, what, where, when, why, how, and they can do it on a worksheet, but they're not actually curious about anything around them because they didn't know that that links together. There's just like a lack of support to emphasize this. So again, you can give all the standards in the world, but if you're not connecting it to real life and just context of how we talk with our friends, or we talk with our family, or we talk with an acquaintance, then we're really missing out on how to make those bridges. Because character, context, and communication will. So these 3 F's of learning would be flexibility, how to pivot, adapt, and stay open in a changing world. And we can just do that through these micro lessons. So if you notice through one of the videos that somebody moved from Brazil to Ireland, then it's like, how did they adapt? What did they do? Do you think they had hard days? Can you function every day in a different language? There's a lot to just kind of give grace for and just start to understand a different perspective. So we even without the child going through these experiences themselves, moving across a country, taking a job in a different country, right? Just these experiences alone, they can start to just process what that would be like. So we can model it with examples, and then you bring it into the classroom or into the conversation with your child of like, we learned how to be flexible in that. Or we learn how to adapt really well in that case. What do you think? What happened in your experience? And just being open to talking about things. This is really important. Because the more that we think about one directional learning, like I already mentioned, the less open we become to sharing human experiences. And guess what? Everybody feels embarrassed. Everybody feels scared. Everybody feels nervous. We all take a leap of faith of some kind with someone or somewhere or something, right? And so just opening that space with these micro lessons. And that also creates room for the next one, which is feedback, learning through reflection, not just grades. Talking about my experience versus your experience seems like conceptually pretty obvious, but the more diverse experiences that they have together, for example, in one of the videos in the conversation module, a girl was talking about the differences in the younger generation and the older generation. Okay, so that might not come up at the dinner table unless, we intentionally bring up how grandpa is 95 and doesn't know how to use a smartphone, but really just taking it from someone else's story of why that might be. Why are they so different, right? And hearing it from a different perspective of somebody that they can relate to. It's like, oh, actually, I think I understand that. Even at a young age, a first grader can understand that there's change, or a first grader can think me too, or oh, not me, right? And so they're learning through reflection of these experiences. And then failure, understanding mistakes as information, not identity. The more that we talk about experiences, the more that mistakes are very normal. The word no is very normal. Not getting what you want the first time is very normal. Making these huge goals and then failing along the way is super, super normal. And so creating that space with these micro lessons is going to just make a bridge, like I've said, with children, no matter if you're at school or at home or anything in between, to bring that to light. So insert intentional conversations, these micro lessons that I'm talking about. The reflection prompts, so maybe like I've said, at bedtime, on walks, during meals, there's these options that we can just start to be really intentional. We can talk about how was your day, and that might start to open, the conversation gate of what they said. But a lot of the time, it's like, fine, good, I've talked to students and I'm like, what do you talk to your parents about when you go home? And they said, we don't talk about what happens here. Okay, so we really want, as a parent, for you to know your child more authentically and fully, and also for a teacher to like really bring out that drive or that identity or the inner voice of what a child really thinks. Because when we think about what we think and then how we feel and what our gut says, they might be different, right? I've experienced this. Maybe you have too, where something logically makes sense, but then we have a different feeling about it, but then your gut is telling you to go a different direction. So sometimes it's in line, and then sometimes we are at odds with ourselves. And so the idea is just to be relatable. And so that's why I bring the curriculum connection here, because even as a parent, you have these options, or you have these opportunities to summarize, synthesize, and analyze. So if, like I've said with the synthesizing, how that child did that in just a couple, I mean, truly, like it was a month or less when I did it, but I would say as a teacher, I noticed it like within 2 weeks. Or even just like the first week of school, there was such a huge impact of how open they were, how curious they were, and how they related to each other. Sometimes when we ask that question of like, how was your day? We're just not going to get the most out of a situation. We want to like be really intentional. And something that Michelle Obama said in that podcast that I just listened to today was like, what a powerful position that teachers hold. And, you know, as parents, it's like you just have such this beautiful moment with your children to be really intentional, to like plant these seeds of like what happens when you doubt yourself, right? When you go through these videos, it's like talking about doubt and like how your child feels doubt at, you know, soccer practice compared to gymnastics might be different. Their body might feel different, their mind might feel different, how they act might feel different. So these behaviors of just reflection are going to come in, just really come in handy in a way that it really helps them reflect, observe and learn about themselves, and then also kind of get strategies, because it's like how maybe how their parent responds would be different, or how their friend would respond is different. So we really just want to make these connections, because ultimately what children are going to be doing is the summarizing, the synthesizing, and the analyzing of characters. Okay, so if you can summarize what a character did in a book, then maybe you can summarize what someone else's experience with doubt is at soccer practice. Or if you synthesize, well, before they wouldn't talk, and now they realize it helps them to talk about it with a friend. Or they used to cry, and now they give themselves a moment to breathe, and then they can go back to soccer practice if they make a mistake. Okay, we are humans. We can be so hard on ourselves. So just the word doubt, I hope, starts to ring a bell with you of conversations that you can be intentionally having with your child. And then analyzing. So just paying attention to details. It's like, oh, if I didn't sleep very well the night before, or if I didn't eat before practice, and then I made a mistake, there's just like these tiny moments that we can start to pay attention to, where they're kind of like a detective, that they pay attention to these small details, because these add up. Okay, also adults act differently if they haven't eaten, if they haven't slept, if they made a mistake and they in front of their boss versus in front of their partner, right? There are always variables. So the goal with Expat Education is just to show you these variables and bring them up authentically in conversation. So get connected. There's so many ways through Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, our website, a private Facebook group, YouTube, and Pinterest. I try and post as much as I can, which is usually daily, not on all of them every day, but most of them every day. I find it's really fun to connect with people digitally, and so they all have kind of a different theme to them. And something I'm diving into a lot right now is my LinkedIn and connecting with people with AI, technology, education, business, and mindset. So I like to share and interact with people there if you are interested to keep up to date, which I will always start to include technology in different platforms, but the real results, the long papers, whatever, I'm starting to just share some posts, then that will be helpful for you. Also, Instagram, this is really great to get some more conversation content of other ways to reflect and to think. And I like to post, you know, sometimes about my life and travels, but then also connecting it to you with like, how can you have this conversation? And then, yeah, there's always something else that we can do. So if you also want to email me, that is Paige at expat.education. So I hope to connect with more of you. The goal is to have a global community for K-8 teachers and parents to really dive into change, to dive into resources, and just to dive into a supportive community. So the global conversation video module is something I've been referring to a lot in this session. So there's a live option where I can work with children, either one-on-one or in group settings. And then there's also a recorded version. So that's really helpful for parents and teachers to just kind of start the lesson when they have time. Some of them are 8 minutes, some of them are longer, but you can start it and stop it as you need. You can just take it at your own pace. And it actually just starts to come up if you start to feel a disconnect, or if you start to feel maybe life is so busy that you're really actually wondering what's going on inside your child's mind, or as a class, if it's just kind of getting too hectic, just either with stress, a lot of either tests or activities. There's just so much going on. If you really want to bring this together, I really recommend the Global Conversation video module, so that it brings outside experience, global scope, community building, confidence boost into the classroom. And I say confidence boosting because once you feel competent in learning different things and having the space to share your thoughts and just really go through this motion of how to communicate for yourself, that gives a child confidence. And I said this at the training I did last night of, if someone says something to me and I don't know how to respond because, first of all, I've never thought about it, or it's just uncomfortable and I don't know how I feel when I feel uncomfortable. Kids go through this, right? In social interactions, so do adults. But really just taking that time to give that space, and that's when they'll feel competent to stick up for themselves, to advocate for themselves, and to advocate for other people. We really need to think more about unity of integrating these social skills and what that can do as children get older, but also thinking about the digital world and the in-person world, is we really need to cultivate learning online, like indirectly through these videos, through the course, but also like using that in real life. And so that competence will start to boost their confidence in a way that they feel like, oh, I know where Australia is. Oh, I've met somebody digitally through the video, to really think about what this means, okay? Also, another course, if you are kindergarten to grade 4, if you're a parent or teacher in this category, this is a really great resource for you. I go academic route to share everything I studied for my master's program. And also, this is modern education right here, 21st century thinking. We generally say it's problem solving and it's analyzing, but actually it's like 30 different categories of how you problem solve and how you analyze. And so I dive into these in very specifically, but also with activities. So this also includes the Global Conversation video module and curriculum support. So this comes with a lot of PDFs from kindergarten that includes math, language, speaking and listening, reading and writing, and all the different grades from kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is a really great resource. I just feel so strongly that adults need to be proactive for what their child is expected to learn, but then like how to do it. So that's why it's the academic realm and also the practical realm. So once you start learning about these topics like cultural competency, then you can look at these videos and be like, oh, we're actually being culturally competent right now because we're meeting people around the world. We're not judging their story. We're learning from their story, knowing that we have different experiences and perspectives, and then we can agree and we can also disagree. These are some really basic communication skills that children are really going to need as they grow up with the global access right at their fingertips. So there's also a coaching opportunity. I say this for teachers and for parents. So you could do a one-time session 5 times or 10 times, just depending on what you're looking for. So sometimes it's just like you need like a kickstart of just like, okay, I just need like this boost to like figure out what this looks like for my case. Or if you want some follow-up to kind of check in, if this is what I'm doing, this is what's working, this is what's not working, I would love to work with you through this coaching session from, either as a teacher or a parent. I think everybody needs support with, starting this route, and I would love to be there for you. Speaking and training, I'm also super passionate about working with schools and preparing them for this. So my focus will be modern education via global competency. And then I use my travel experience as well as the global conversations to go through what this process looks like. Routine is really good, and just what those skills look like from a conceptual aspect to a practical aspect. Any closing remarks and questions, please put in the chat and we will talk after this. And then thank you so much. I think it's so important for adults to be proactive about learning. I know that from traveling, for me, it's very natural. It's like I go to a new place, I learn I either like adapt to the language and learn about what to do, and then I go do it and I learn the directions and how to get there, and I meet a new friend and then I learn about them, and learning is like this constant wheel that I really love and find so natural. And so I know that when we get really stuck in our jobs or in our routine, that the learning feels extra. It feels tiring. And what I'm going to challenge you to do through these global conversation video modules and through Expat Education is just to feel a little bit lighter. Know that people around the world are experiencing a lot, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and we can just start to relate on that. And so once you get into this mindset of having open conversations and really just checking in on those tiny moments of doubt at soccer practice, or just those tiny moments where you ask this context versus this context, and then you can relate to somebody else, then you're going to feel a bit lighter and supported, and hopefully find that learning curve is, spinning your wheels as well in the best way possible to move forward. Okay, so thank you all again. Please, let's talk. Here's a website and my email to keep in touch. And I thank you again so much for being here today.